Daniel checked his portfolio 3 times before lunch, read 2 market predictions, watched a video about the next big opportunity, and made a small adjustment to his investments. He felt productive, responsible, smart. The problem? Everything he did that day probably made him a worse investor. There is a behavior that destroys more investment returns than market crashes, more than inflation, more than bad stock picks. Almost every investor knows about it. Almost every investor does it, and most people don't realize they're doing it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why many investors underperform not because they do too little, but because they do too much. Chapter 1. The Productivity Trap. Daniel genuinely wanted to become a better investor, so he did what ambitious people usually do. He worked harder, he consumed more information, he followed financial news, listened to podcasts, read market commentary, compared strategies, analyzed trends. Every day felt productive. Every day felt like progress. And that's exactly what made the trap so difficult to see. Because in almost every area of life, more effort produces better results. If you want stronger muscles, train harder. If you want better grades, study more. If you want to improve a skill, practice more. The relationship is clear: more effort, better outcome. So naturally, most people assume investing works the same way. But investing is different, very different, because the market doesn't reward effort, it rewards outcomes. And those are not always the same thing. In fact, some of the most expensive mistakes investors make happen immediately after they decide to take action. A purchase, a sale, a prediction, a reaction. The market doesn't care how busy you are. The market only cares whether your decisions were correct. And that's a much harder game. Chapter 2. Why investors keep doing too much. The problem is that the market constantly invites action. Every day there is a headline, a prediction, a warning, a new opportunity. Someone is always telling you what happens next. A recession is coming. Interest rates will fall. Technology stocks are overvalued. Artificial intelligence is the future. Housing is collapsing. Housing is booming. Every headline creates a feeling, and every feeling creates a temptation. The temptation to do something, anything, because doing something feels productive. Doing nothing feels irresponsible, but here's the irony. The financial world benefits when investors stay active. News companies need attention. Brokerages earn money when people trade. Analysts need audiences. Financial media needs stories. Everything around you encourages activity. Very little encourages patience. And that creates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that successful investing requires constant involvement. When in reality, many of the greatest investing outcomes came from long periods of doing almost nothing at all. Chapter 3. The hidden cost of every decision. Most investing mistakes don't look like mistakes when they happen. They look reasonable. Selling after a frightening headline, buying after exciting news, moving money into a new opportunity, waiting for a better entry point. Each decision seems logical. Each decision feels intelligent. But every decision creates risk, the risk of being wrong. And investing has a unique characteristic. Small mistakes compound, not dramatically, quietly. One missed recovery, one emotional sale, one delayed investment, one unnecessary adjustment. Individually, they seem insignificant, but over years they begin to accumulate, just like compound interest, except in the wrong direction. Most investors understand the power of compounding gains. Far fewer understand the power of compounding mistakes, and that difference matters a lot. Chapter 4. A Tale of Two Investors. Imagine 2 investors. Both begin at the same age. Both invest $500 every month. Both want financial freedom. Neither has special information. Neither can predict the future. The first investor behaves a lot like Daniel. He follows the news, adjusts his portfolio, moves money around, experiments with strategies, waits for opportunities, responds to market events. The second investor follows a much simpler approach. Every month he invests. Every month he stays consistent. He remains diversified, and he rarely changes anything. At first, there doesn't seem to be much difference. In fact, the first investor often feels smarter, more informed, more engaged, more sophisticated. But investing is not judged after 1 year or 2. It's judged after decades. And that's where the difference appears. If one investor earns an average return of 10% per year, and the other earns just 7%, The gap becomes enormous, not because 3% sounds dramatic, but because time magnifies everything. After 20 years, the difference can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars, even though both investors contributed the same amount of money. The difference wasn't intelligence. The difference wasn't effort. The difference was behavior. Chapter 5. The Cost of Being Right. There is another trap that catches many investors, and it sounds completely reasonable: the desire to be right. Imagine the market falls 20%. Headlines become frightening. Experts begin predicting even worse outcomes. Daniel decides to sell. A few weeks later, the market falls further, and for a moment, Daniel feels brilliant. He was right. He avoided losses. He made the correct prediction. But then something unexpected happens. The market begins to recover. Slowly at first, then faster. And now Daniel faces a new problem. When should he buy back in? If he buys too early, he risks another decline. If he waits too long, he misses the recovery. So he waits and waits and waits. Meanwhile, the market continues climbing. Months later, Daniel finally reinvests. Not because conditions became clear, but because he can no longer tolerate watching prices rise without him. On paper, Daniel was right. He correctly predicted the decline, yet he still ended up with worse results. Because investing isn't a game where points are awarded for accurate predictions. It's a game where outcomes matter more than opinions. Many investors spend years trying to prove they're smart, trying to predict the next crash, the next boom, the next opportunity, the next recession. But wealth is rarely built by being right occasionally. It's usually built by staying invested consistently. The market doesn't reward correct forecasts. It rewards participation. And sometimes the investor who makes fewer predictions ends up with better results. Chapter 6. The Patience Premium. This leads to one of the most misunderstood ideas in investing. Patience isn't just important. Patience is a competitive advantage. Most people think investing is primarily a test of intelligence. It's not. It's often a test of patience. Because investing contains long periods where nothing exciting happens, months, sometimes years. No dramatic breakthroughs, no obvious rewards, no signs that your strategy is working. And that's exactly when people become vulnerable. Humans crave feedback. We want progress. We want reassurance. We want evidence that we're moving in the right direction. But the market doesn't always provide immediate feedback. Sometimes the biggest rewards arrive after long periods of boredom. And boredom is something many investors simply cannot tolerate. So they act. Not because action is necessary, because inactivity feels uncomfortable. The irony is that compound interest needs time to work. And time demands patience. You cannot rush it. You cannot force it. You cannot optimize your way around it. You can only stay long enough for it to happen. Chapter 7. Why Smart People Often Underperform. This creates an interesting paradox. Some of the smartest investors struggle the most. Not because they lack knowledge, because knowledge can create confidence, and confidence can create activity. The smarter people feel, the more likely they are to believe they can improve outcomes through constant intervention. They search for patterns. They analyze every headline. They look for signals. They try to optimize every decision, and sometimes that becomes the problem. Because investing contains a large amount of uncertainty, no amount of intelligence can eliminate it. No amount of research can remove it. No amount of effort can fully control it. Yet many intelligent investors behave as if they can. The market has humbled brilliant people for generations, not because they weren't smart, but because they underestimated uncertainty. Sometimes the greatest investing skill is accepting what cannot be known and building a strategy that works anyway. Chapter 8. The Real Advantage. Eventually, Daniel realized something. The best investors weren't necessarily the busiest. They weren't constantly changing strategies. They weren't reacting to every headline. They weren't trying to predict every market move. Instead, they built systems. Systems that worked even when emotions appeared. Systems that didn't require perfect timing. Systems that didn't depend on perfect decisions. Systems designed for decades, not days. Because wealth is rarely built by one brilliant decision. It's usually built by hundreds of ordinary decisions repeated consistently over time. Invest regularly. Stay diversified. Keep costs low. Control emotions. Stay invested. The actions themselves are not complicated. The difficulty comes from repeating them when the world constantly encourages you to do something else. And that's where the real advantage comes from. Not intelligence, not information, not prediction, discipline. Conclusion: most investors underperform for a surprisingly simple reason. They mistake activity for progress. They mistake movement for improvement. They mistake information for wisdom. And they underestimate the value of patience. Most investors think wealth is built by making great decisions. In reality, wealth is often built by avoiding bad ones, avoiding emotional reactions, avoiding unnecessary trades, avoiding the temptation to constantly interfere. Because investing often rewards the exact behavior that feels the least productive. Staying invested, following a plan, ignoring noise, and waiting. Most investors spend their lives trying to beat the market. The most successful ones often spend their lives simply staying in it. If you enjoyed this video and want more insights into investing, wealth building, financial freedom, and the psychology behind financial decisions, consider subscribing to The Engineering of Investing. Because understanding investments is important, but understanding the behavior behind successful investing may be even more valuable. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.